There it is. Did you hear it too? Recording in progress. You
Yeah.
good?
Do I click got it? Got it. Got it. Okay.
We're all good.
Yeah.
Welcome, welcome. Yay. Okay.
Hi.
We are here live with Emily Coates, who I'm going to introduce her and then I'm going to have her take the lead for most of this sesh because we could talk for probably days. I'm going to give a shout out to Rich because he kind of introduced us and got us together. And I feel like we are each other's spirit animals. I feel like we could probably be besties in real life, but there is so much that has happened in your life that has gotten you to this remarkable place today that you're helping and going to help a bajillion people in this world. And I can already feel it. So let's see, how do I want to introduce that? We are going to do a 2-part series here with you because there is so much to talk about and dive in. And I think the community of this Life's the Pits here on this podcast enjoys hearing from people that have gone through some really hard things and have used that to really persevere. And so they want to hear the whole story. They're going to want the deets as much as you're willing to give.
I've
And
got them.
I know you do. And then in the second half of this series, which we'll record at a later date, we're going to really dive into more of the specifics around how you can help people moving forward. And so today's just your backstory and all about you and the most amazing pieces that have been created from this chaos that you have, unfortunately or fortunately, been through. But I'm so grateful, to be honest, that like we've kind of, I follow you on social now and I see your stuff and I'm just like, this, I don't know how I landed in this role in life, but like, I'm so grateful to meet people like you because you're an inspiration and you're killing it in all areas. So I'm excited to see what's next for you in this new year. But with all that said, I'm going to lead you in with, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, who you are. I mean, obviously I said you're a mama, but give us the deets on that. And then we can kind of go from there on like what you feel like you want to share with the world of this totally wild ride you've been on.
Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on. I've never done anything like this, so it's cool that I get the chance to. Also, shout out to Rich for connecting us. Um, so yeah, I'm Emily Coates, as you mentioned, and I am a mother of 3 boys, 3 crazy boys, 7, 6, and almost 2. And it's just been a wild ride getting here. Um, you know, obviously everybody has their own story and goes through their own experiences. But I think for me, one of the biggest things that, like, why I want to talk about it is, for me, I found it hard to love myself while hating the experiences that shaped me. So, going through the process of, um, processing everything and understanding my experiences in my past and the trauma has really made me learn to not necessarily love the experiences, because that might be a little hard to do, but I certainly don't hate them, because it wouldn't I wouldn't be the person I am right now if I hadn't gone through each of these things. And I truly believe that. I believe that there's a reason that, and we'll get to all the things here in a second that I'm referring to, but I really don't think I would be able to help people the way that I am and the way that I plan to, um, if I hadn't gained the strength that I have from everything that I've been through. So,
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, I remember when we first met and we were chatting and you were just like, I'm word vomiting. And I'm like, I'm sitting here like mind blown. And I have a pretty decent poker face. I mean, like I'm very expressive, but I have a pretty decent poker face because I've heard a lot of traumatic, like wild things in my life. Right. So I can usually inside be like, oh my God, but like outwardly be, oh wow. And I think I was like that, but internally I was like, I finally said to you, I was like, how are you standing right now? Like, I think I actually said, like, how are you even like a human able to raise these tiny humans and have a beautiful relationship with your husband and help like be an advocate, a fierce advocate? Like, I'm just like, I have no idea how you're doing all that just because the things you have gone through. I think any one of those things that you've gone through could have taken me out. So it's just unbelievable. But why don't we kind of start wherever you feel safe and comfortable starting, whether at the beginning or whatever piece you feel like, you know what, I'm ready to share this today, and kind of walk
Okay.
through. I'll guide you a little just to kind of, because I kind of know the timeline slightly, but kind of give you the stage here of like share
Okay.
how resilient you are.
Yes. Keep me on track because, like you said, we could talk for days,
Good.
and each
Good.
thing could just snowball into all sorts of stuff. But so I'm not, childhood was actually the most normal part of my life. I can't say that anything was too out of the ordinary. Growing up, grew up actually right around here where I still live. Um, I guess I'll start with when my older brother Matthew, passed away unexpectedly from a drug overdose. Um, that kind of was the first domino that led to all the other ones falling. Um, I was 14 and he was 19 at the time, and it was October of 2005, and I was a freshman in high school and he had just graduated. And it was the morning of October 21st, and I had gone to school like normal. Um, and I, being 14, I wasn't really aware of like drug problems or what they looked like and what they meant. Back then, it wasn't as, again, being 14, maybe I didn't realize it, but it wasn't as talked about as it is now. Um, so like I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know when when he was high or when he wasn't. But anyways, and it was October 21st and I was at school and I got called down to the principal's office. And there are so many more details here. So I'm definitely giving like a nutshell version. Um, but I am writing, actually just finished a book and it's in there. So more on that later.
Can't wait.
Um, uh, but I got called down to the principal's office, and my mom and the school nurse were there, and they pulled me into a room, and my mom said, "Your brother died this morning." Um, and she didn't say right then what it was. I found out later when we got to the hospital. Um, he had stayed at his dad's house the night before, so fortunately, unfortunately for him, but fortunately for me personally, it didn't happen in the house that we were living in. Um, but yeah, he was found unresponsive by his dad, who went to wake him up to go hunting in the morning. And um, they, they tried to revive him, but it was too late. And then, they did the autopsy report, which came back and was just, ugh, the amount of stuff was just, and when I look back at it now, like now I know what these things are, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it was just everything you can think of. Like Oxycontin was the biggest drug in his system. I mean, thousands of milligrams. Um, so that was kind of the first big event, traumatic event that happened. Um, and then, again, there are so many more details, but I'll leave it at that for now. Um, and then my parents had gotten divorced a week before that happened. And I actually just found that out because I hadn't remembered that. I actually was talking to my mom about it, and she's like, "Yeah, your dad asked me for a divorce 1 week before Matthew died," which that was news to me recently. Um, but so anyway, they had been divorced. So so then it was just my mom and I at the house after my brother died. And uh my mom had been working at the VA at the time, and it was shortly after that in 2006. when she had met a man named Kevin, who she had just met, who was coming through her program. She worked with vets who were going through the rehab program there for alcoholism or other abuse, substance abuse. And they had met, and she was like, why don't you come stay with me, and we'll get you better, and you're not allowed to do that with patients. But he came to stay with us a week after they met, and he moved in. He showed up in a taxi with one blue duffel bag, and that's all he had with him. And it was it was there's a word I could put here that I'm not even sure what it is, but it was, I guess, shocking, because she had just met this man, and I was like, I don't like the sounds of this, probably not a good idea. But she was in a dark place. Like, I don't think she realized she was in a dark place after losing Matthew. I think she seemed fine to everybody else, but I could tell she wasn't. Obviously, her decision making was not the best. So, he moved in with us, and at first things were all right. I could tell I didn't like him right away, but I was like, I'll give this guy a chance. Maybe like things will work themselves out.
And at this
And
point, you were still in high school, like
yeah,
teenager.
I was, well, it was the next year. So like going into sophomore year, um, 15, 16, right around that time. The timeline of things gets a little fuzzy because everything kind of blurred together because it was all happening at the same time. But yeah, I was still in high school. And then a couple months after, well, maybe about a month after he moved in, he started to drink daily all day, and I really got to see how bad his problem was. And I had never seen anything like that. Just severe drinking. And then he was just so abusive, to me. He just wanted me out of the way because he just wanted my mom all to himself, and he made that very apparent. I mean, he literally said, like, I want you the hell out of here. The words he would use, just the worst things you can think of. um Threatening to kill me, threatening to kill my mom, threatening to kill my grandparents. I mean, there's police records that say all this. This is not like, I mean, there's actual evidence of all this on record. But he would drink and then just absolutely lose his mind. The voicemails, I mean, he said he was going to come to my school and find me. He said he was going to come to the cemetery because I go there often to visit Matthew, that he was going to come find me there and hurt me. And um it was just, at first, like, I was obviously very scared of it, but then it became so normal that I didn't even think anything of it. Almost like I don't know what Stockholm syndrome is, but it's kind of like you just get so far into it that it becomes your normal, and you're like, you expect it. And like, I expected to be called a slut and a whore, and for this man who was in my house to be like, I'm going to kill you in your sleep. And I was just like, okay, like, that's fine. Whatever. You said that yesterday. So you're drunk again. But, you know, he was just, it was absolutely crazy. And like, my mom didn't, she was so blinded because she really thought she could fix him. Like, she really was like, I just give him time. Like, she would make excuses, and he's going to get better, and we just have to get him back into rehab. Like, he's going to be better. He doesn't mean to be doing any of this, like sticking up for him. And I was like, Mom, like, no, this is going to end badly for one or both of us if things, like, if he doesn't get out of here. There was an incident where he slid a knife across my neck in our kitchen. Obviously, he was very drunk, and so was my mom at the time. And he's like, don't think I won't, and it's just, and it was, I think it was like the next day after that I moved out and went to live with my aunt in Rushville, where my dad was staying. Um, and that had gone on for like I just went through like 2 years of stuff right there in that little blurb. Because that went on for about 2 years and 7 months they were together. And there was a few times like the police were called, the knife incident was one, and he would go to jail, but then my mom would, like, she called the police, but then she would bail him out like the next day, because she felt bad. Um, so obviously like her brain was, and I completely understand looking back, and even at the time, like she lost her son. I can't imagine being a mother now, losing one. I can't even talk about it. Like, so I can't totally put myself in her shoes, but I have enough empathy to be like, well, I mean, her mind was obviously in a place that I hope to never be in. Um,
It sounds as though she was looking for, not looking for, like, this was kind of that void to take her mind away from having to actually process the death of your brother, to actually go and get the support and the help to, like, sit with that horrible
yeah,
trauma, right? And so it was one of those things where it's like, well, I have this person I can focus on and I can fix him because I couldn't fix my son, right? Like
yes,
I missed out on the opportunity to help him, and here's somebody who has similar needs. Um Maybe I can, this is my way of paying it forward, of trying to help somebody in need. However, being a kid and a son is much different than being a grown man who is making choices that, right? So
exactly. And I mean, that's exactly what it was. There was a hole and she was just trying to fill it. And he knew that. I mean, he knew about what had happened, and he took complete advantage of that and was like, I'll be happy to, fill the hole no matter what that means, even if it means putting you and your daughter and your whole family through the depths of hell. He was happy to be the one to do that because he got a free ride. He was staying with us. He wasn't paying for anything. He didn't have a car, didn't have a job. Um, no, the VA wouldn't take him back, or something like that. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but something happened there where like the VA was like, whatever happened there. But so obviously, like, she was trying to get him help, and she had tried to detox him once in our bathroom downstairs. And I remember him getting violently, violently ill to the point where she ended up just giving him a drink because you're supposed to, when it's that severe, you should be in a hospital doing
yeah.
that because things could go very bad, like seizing and
Yep.
worse. But
Yeah.
so she tried and she really thought she could do it. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was. I think she was like, I failed
Mhm.
trying to get my son help. And we did try to get my brother help too. He had gone through rehab and we thought everything was fine, but addiction doesn't care about that. Addiction is the only, door where the lock is on the inside. You really got to unlock that yourself. But um, so yeah, so anyway, um, it was,
So about 2 years, 2.5
yeah,
years
two
of
and a half
going
years of
through
this, and then I had been out still living with my aunt and dad in Rushville, and at this point, I had graduated, so now we're like, I'm out of high school. I had just graduated because it was 2009, and I graduated in '09, and I was going to Flick at the time, and but I was at my aunt's house, and there was a knock on the front door. And this is where things get really crazy. If you can believe that, they get even crazier. There was a knock on the door, and it was my mom, and she was like, "Why don't we go take a drive around the lake?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's odd and random," but we had done that before, so it wasn't crazy. But I was like, "Okay." So I yelled into my dad. I'm like, "Dad, I'm gonna go take a ride around the lake with mom." And I shit you not, he was like, "Okay, just be careful because you never know with her." To heed a warning. And so I'm like, okay, we get in the car, we're driving. She had asked me to drive, and we're heading down the road towards the lake. And she, it was kind of quiet because, like, she knew better than to talk about Kevin with me because I never, like, I don't want to talk about him. But she looked at me and she goes, "So I did something bad." Just like that, kind of almost smiling. And I was like, okay, knowing her, that could be any number of things.
very
And
nonchalant,
she,
right?
yeah. And I was like, okay, what'd you do? And she's like, I poisoned him. And I was like, what? What do you mean you poisoned him? And she was like, I poisoned him. And I was like, who? And I knew who she was talking about, but I needed her to say the word, and she was like, Kevin. And I was like, what, what, speechless, obviously, because how do you respond to that? And, she was like, I'm like, where is he? What? And she goes, he's back at the house. He's not in great shape. She was like, actually, if you don't mind, I would like to go back to the house and have you check on him. And I was 18 at this time, and not not I was in a state of shock because obviously the next thing I did after she told me this, I had to have been in shock because that they were not that of a normal rational thinking person. And I was like, okay. So I drove to the house, the house I grew up in that they were still living at. And, we get out of the car and she sits on the front steps and I'm like, what are you doing? And she goes, I don't want to see him like that. Can you go check on him? And I'm like, I guess, again, thinking back. But at the time, I was like, okay. So I walk up the stairs into the house and, I walk up the steps and into the living room. She's like, he's in the living room. So I go in the living room and holy shit. I mean, it was just, I don't know if I can swear here.
You're
Um,
fine.
um, and he was quite obviously dying. He was in the process of dying. He was completely incoherent. He couldn't respond to anything I was saying. I called his name. He was kind of convulsing. There was like weird foam stuff coming from his nose and his mouth. Um, I clapped at him and I was like, Kevin, Kevin, and just nothing. Like his eyes were kind of half open. And I was like, well, this is not good. And I was like, I don't want to be here. So I walked back outside and I was like, yeah, Ma, like he's dying and you have to call the cops. Like you got to call the police. And um, she's like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And she's like, well, what can we do? And I'm like, we aren't doing anything. I should not be here, and um she had asked me a question that was so it just it's just shocking, I guess. And again, at the time, that I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't think what I should have thought of it. But she was like, well, what if we just like bring him out to the woods? What if we just get rid of him? And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm leaving. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, I don't, I mean, this man was like 300 pounds, huge, huge dude, like just stocky, just muscular. And I'm like, even if he wasn't 300 pounds, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm like, I'm going to leave. So I got in the car and I was like, I'm out of here. And so when I left, I didn't know she was going to do this, but she had actually called my dad and she was like, can you come out? So I was on my way back to my dad's and my dad was on his way to where I just was because she thought, he would help do something to, get him out of the house. And when he got there, he called the police right away. And they, the ambulance showed up and it took like 7 paramedics to get him out of the house and they brought him to Thompson Hospital. And, you know, I didn't really ask my mom all the details of like what happened at the time because I was dealing with having to see this in my living room. Um, but later she had told me that she had poured antifreeze into his margarita mix. And this was all like, again, everything I'm saying right now is all out there. So it's not like she's gonna go get caught because like everything, I'll get there in a second. But so yeah, but what happened at the hospital was because he was a known alcoholic, and once they finally figured out that it was antifreeze, because she never told the doctors what it was. They were trying to figure it out, like what could have happened to him. They finally found out that it was ethylene glycol. I think that's how you say the actual chemical. in antifreeze. And they came out and they're like, we're so sorry, ma'am. Sometimes alcoholics do this to get a buzz. They'll go around the house trying to find whatever substance they can. And they were like, we're so sorry. And his parents ended up pulling the life support off like 7 days after this happened. And she walked away, and that was that. At the time, that was that. So we kind of never talked about it. My dad obviously knew what had happened. We didn't talk about it. My mom and I didn't talk about it. It just kind of like was this thing that happened. And then we just kind of like shut the book, and we're like, I didn't know if it was because we didn't want to, or if it was because like, I don't know, we just didn't talk about it. And a couple months later, because that was October, the end of October 2009. And then New Year's Day of 2010, my mom decided we should take a trip, a little vacation down to Florida. I'm not going to use names here just for purposes, not specific names, just because legal, whatever. Still working on that as far as the book goes too. But so we go down to Florida to see her friend that she had known for a long time, that she grew up with. And we drove down there together, just my mom and I. We get there late, I don't know, whatever it was, we'll call it a Tuesday. And I was tired, so I went to bed, but my mom stayed up to chat with her friend and her friend's husband. And the next morning, the husband, who was very nice, and I had met him before, he was like, let's go to breakfast at Cracker Barrel. And just him and me. And I was like, cool, that sounds great. Like, let's do it. So we go to breakfast and had a great time. And he had made a phone call towards the end of breakfast. And then he came back and he goes, okay, we were ready to go. So we're driving back to their house, and we turned the corner and there was police cars everywhere. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he goes, I'm so sorry. And I just lost it and was like, oh my God. Like, I knew right away what had happened. And sure enough, my mom had told her friend the night before when we got there what she had done. Not thinking that her friend was going to turn her in. She was just chatting like it was over, Sunday brunch, like it was nothing. She was just telling her friend what had happened. And her friend, the next morning had decided to call the police and turn my mom in for everything. And so my mom had to fly back to New York, for whatever, to be arraigned or arrested or whatever it was at the time. And I had to stay in Florida.
So she was brought into custody at that point, though.
She wasn't. They let her fly back to New York by herself. No marshals, no nothing, because they didn't have enough evidence. Like, they were just, at that point, it's just hearsay. I mean, obviously that's a big hearsay, turning somebody in for murder, but they can't actually do anything until there's, I don't know how that whole process works, but I mean, and even asking my mom, she goes, yeah, I just flew back. She goes, she even had to change flights in Alabama or something. I mean, she could have literally just bounced, but she was by herself. She got back to New York. There wasn't even police at the airport. My dad and my aunt picked her up at the airport and brought her home. And it wasn't until a couple days later, she was sitting up in her room and the police knocked on the door, and that's when they cuffed her. So I think they just had to like get all the information, or like, I don't know how that whole process worked, but in talking to everybody, and I was taking police statements down in Florida because now I'm involved. They know my involvement. They know that I was a part of it. So I had to take statements, and they basically were like, you got to be honest with us and tell us everything we need to know, or you're going to be sitting right there with her. So obviously I did what I was supposed to do. And I was down there in Florida with these folks for about 2 weeks. Which that was crazy in itself, because it's just like, I barely know these people. They're my mom's friends, and here I'm just stuck down here because we had the car and I wasn't driving across the whole country by myself to get back home.
At 18. Yeah.
At 18, yeah, nonetheless. So, and I'm talking to police and dealing with my mom going back to New York. And then at some point my dad flew down, because he had actually also gotten questioned, and because he was involved also. So I'm like, do I have any parents left, or are they both in a jail cell? But they let him go because he also cooperated. He came down to get me, and we drove back to New York together. Um, and uh it was and they had arrested my mom, so she had been in jail that whole time, and it was actually her birthday, February 7th, that my grandpa got the $100,000 bail money to get her out. And she got out, and they had set her trial date for September of 2010. So she was out for that summer of 2010, which was just basically a summer of meeting with lawyers and prepping for the trial and dealing with all of this, because I hadn't dealt with any of this yet, processed any of it yet, and neither had my mom. Because it was a lot. I mean, it was just one thing after the other, like from Matthew to Kevin to the 2 years with Kevin, to what she had done to her friend turning her in. I mean, the whole that whole snowball of things
Trauma.
I never got to like undo. So anyway,
So much trauma. Yeah.
yeah, just like trauma lasagna. Like it was just layers of trauma noodles that were building up, and I didn't get to eat any of it. I wasn't able to digest the first layer before the next one was piled on. All in a 4-year time span. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of the biggest part of like the most traumatic at that time. And then we get into the trial, which that was um that was crazy, because I had to testify against her because I was a witness. And they subpoenaed me, and you can't get out of that. And there's nothing in New York that says like a child doesn't have to testify against their parent. I think there is one against a husband and a wife, if I remember correctly, but not parent to child. Um, so I had to testify against her, which was just horrible, because it's just like you see in the shows, like I'm up on the stand and she's sitting there, and like she can literally we are looking at each other as I'm saying things that are only going to help put her away for longer. Um, and it lasted 4 days, and then I mean, she had already admitted to everything, you know, she admitted she did what she did. It was just up to the jury to decide like the why of it, that it was self-defense, and that honestly, if she hadn't done what she did, either he was going to kill me, he was going to kill me and then her, if she hadn't done what she did, and I'm not saying what she did is in any way acceptable or right, and I will never condone it. I will never, because there's people that I tell the story to that are like, your mom's my hero, and it's like, because there's other domestic abuse survivors that are like, man, if I had the guts to do that to my abuser. And it's just like, yeah, but on the other hand, having to go through that and see it, and like, he was horrible, but I would never wish, like, my mom played God that day, and nobody should play God and take somebody else's life that way. Um, so, but at the same time, I wouldn't be here if she hadn't done what she done. So it's just like there's this devil angel thing in my head all the time that's like, I hate her for what she did, because it really, I mean, really screwed me up at the time. But like also, I wouldn't be here and have this amazing life if, like, I can pretty much guarantee that, like, it would have happened. It was just a matter of when. Um, so yeah. So anyway, and then she got her sentencing was in November, and she got sentenced to 23 years flat, for second degree manslaughter. Um, so and then they took her to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, where she stayed. Um, you know. So yeah, that was kind of that portion of time. Um,
Which is, even though it sounds, like, okay, 4 years ish, give or take, right? It sounds like, well, that's a long time, like that's a whole school career, right? But when we think about our high school days or college days, depending on who you are, whatever, like you think about that time frame and how that goes in life, right? Like I'm working with a slew of teenagers right now therapeutically. And it's so interesting because some of them are seniors, some of them are freshmen. I have a couple interchange, sophomores, juniors there, but the freshmen are like, oh God, I can't wait till, and then the seniors are like, I don't know how I'm a senior already. Like, I can't believe this is my last year. Right. And even
It's
though they're so ready to be done, but they're like, wow, this last 4 years is like so quick. It's such a small snapshot of time when you think about, a potential 100 years of existence or so, right? Like it's just a snippet of time. And it was so much trauma in that such short period of time. Plus, so not to geek out on this, but like psychologically, our brains don't fully develop till we're about 23. So for you, your brain is not even fully developed and you've kind of engaged in so much trauma and it's it's like grooving into your brain. Right. And so
yeah,
then
it's becoming parts of it. Like it's becoming a permanent part of what is my brain. Yes. Yes.
And so then subsequently, how you react to things in the future that might be traumatic, you're not going to react as somebody who has never experienced trauma. You're either going to overreact because your fight or flight system is just, so triggered to something that you don't need to, or you're going to completely underreact and just be like, yeah, sounds about right. Which you
That
probably
is,
experienced both.
yeah,
But
I think like,
wild.
yeah. And at the time, again, like it's so different now when I look back, thinking about how I was reacting at the time. Because like when I tell people the story, like their jaw is just wide open and they have no words. And I'm like, what? And they're like, Emily, that is insanity. And I'm like, oh, like, but, and that's how, and it's kind of like you just said, like when really traumatic things kind of happened after that, a lot of times I would underplay it, or like I would just be like, yeah, okay, and people would tell me their stories of their trauma. Like I have a good friend who has suffered several devastating miscarriages. And to me, I'm like, how did you get through that? Like, I couldn't imagine going through that. And she like, and obviously everybody's level of trauma and how they deal with it, and everybody's meters are completely different. And that's totally okay. And it's like, me looking at her story, I'm like, that is, and she's like, and while she obviously understands that what she went through is traumatic, she would sit there and listen to me and be like, like you've said when we first met, like, how are you still breathing? How did you make it this far? Like, and I look at her and I'm like, how did you make it through all that? So it's just crazy, like how trauma works, because, that was my life. So it's kind of like, or it is my life. So talking about it, and I'm very open about it. There's never been, I'm obviously, I'm an open book. I wrote a book about all of this. Um, and which has been great. I mean, that's been its own therapy in itself. But, as I've been processing, because I'm still processing it, I will probably always be processing what happened, because those are not things you can just be like, okay, yeah, I think I definitely have a grasp on what happened. While I do, I don't, because sometimes it'll hit me randomly and I'll be like, wow, like that is just wow, but yeah, it's crazy about that brain development piece, because my brain was chemically changed at that time and has been that way ever since. So
100%, right? And so, and statistics show that, science shows that, all the research shows that, right? So, however, it also goes to show you that a few things. I mean, your mom was going through such traumatic things that caused her to behave a certain way. You went through very similar traumatic things, but you behaved different from it, right? So, granted, we're going to get into a second here. I do want to take a couple minutes to
yes.
talk about that, but how we can experience very parallel traumatic things and almost trauma bond over it, right? But then how we decide to take the next move is really that behavioral piece. It's just very interesting, right? So what I wanted to ask, or for you to have kind of share, if you will, And I
Mhm.
know you shared with me, and I know this is a part of your healing journey and in your book, but your relationship with your mom, because I'm sure a lot of people that are going to listen to it are going to be like, so where's the mom? What's happening? Right?
Yes.
So, and I think this is just such a powerful thing to talk about because I know when we chatted last there, well, you were just saying like there's this angel and devil part of you that's like, I hate my mom for this, but I also love her for, what she tried to do to protect you, right? Like there is this thing within you and you're like, I can't question that because if I was in the same position, I don't
You
know.
know, yeah.
You just
Yes.
never know. And we hear wild stories like this all the time, because when people are, you know,
Faced with,
yeah,
yeah. So and like you just said, like, if you ask a mom anywhere, like, would you kill for your kid? I mean, obviously, and obviously they'd be like, of course I would. Like, if it came down to it, like, mama bear, like, I will do whatever it takes to keep my kids safe. And when you say whatever it takes, that means whatever it takes. And in her mind, it was whatever it takes. And then
no
she
other
did
way
this.
out. In her mind, there was no other way out.
There was no way because she knew she wasn't strong enough to keep him out because she had tried several times, like calling the police, but she would just get him back. Like she was trying so hard. And then when she realized, like, there's no way, like, my daughter's like gone. And if I don't take care of this my way, then something worse is going to happen. So she made a decision. And I'll say real quick, talking to her now, and even like a bit after it all happened, I asked her, like, what was your thought process? Like when you decided that day or that night to do this? And she's like, I don't even know. She goes, I wasn't thinking. She goes, I didn't sit there and think I'm going to do this. She goes, I was watching a show called Snapped on Oxygen. Um, and it's a show about, partners who have done similar things or whatever. And a woman had put antifreeze, and I think it was her husband's Jello shots or something. And she had they had this bucket of margarita mix in the fridge, and he had been I don't know where he was, but he was either like passed out sleeping or he was not obviously awake to see her do this. But she's like, I went down to the garage, I grabbed a bottle of antifreeze and I just poured it in his drink. And then he drank it. And that's what happened. She goes, I didn't have like a conscious thought of this is what I'm going to do. She goes, I was out of my body. She goes, she goes, looking back now, she goes, I don't even remember doing it. She goes, I don't even remember doing it. Like she doesn't like, it was, so two parts to what you asked about my relationship with her and where she's at, because obviously that was back in 2010. It's 2023. And there's a lot of details here too, but more on that when the book gets released. People can find the details there about like her time in prison, because everybody has so many questions about that too, about like what's it like, and when I went to visit her and other inmates and the whole thing. But she spent 11 years. It was like 10 years and almost, it was almost 11 years at Bedford Hills, which is up near New York City. It's about 7 hours away. Um, uh, and then there was a domestic violence act or a new law that was passed 2 years ago in New York. And her case was actually the first one that they took on for this. And it was a public defender here in Ontario County who took her case and combed through it, and she check marked all the boxes for all the domestic, violence and abuse. And um, they got her out. They got her out, and she already had years off, knocked off for good behavior. I mean, she was an older inmate. She had never even had a speeding ticket. I mean, she wouldn't hurt a fly. I know that sounds crazy to say, but she's just a sweet little old lady who, used to bake cookies and cakes for people. But so she had spent 11 years there, and we never lost our relationship during all of that. There were times, and I grew a big backbone, I will say. I really learned boundaries during the time she was away. I grew up, during this time, because this was my whole 20s. She was gone for my entire that decade of time, which is like in my opinion, one of the most important life-changing decades you go through. You're learning who you are. Your brain is fully developing. You're, at 23, and um, she missed me getting married. She missed the birth of my children, which is a lot to go through without your mom there. So obviously there was a lot of yeah, there was a lot to go through mentally, because again, that devil angel, I was so mad that she made a decision that took her away from me during one of the most important parts of my life. But like, I also forgave her. I forgave myself because that's a lot on me too, because I didn't call the police, and like morally I should have when she told me what she did, but I didn't, because like I just couldn't bring myself to do that. So I forgave myself, which was like a big process. That was a lot of the healing, and like, asking God for forgiveness and forgiving her, because I understand why she did what she did. Especially being a mom now, but I forgave her even before I had children, because, you know, we needed that in order for our relationship to stay where it's at. I mean, we're still best friends. We call every day. She's actually waiting for my call when this is done to see how it went. Um, so she's out. I mean, her health is she got diagnosed with Parkinson's last year. So she's, not able to walk or anything anymore, which is obviously um it's hard, because she's like, here I get out early to enjoy my daughter and my grandkids, and really can't, because she's pretty immobile. But the fact that she's out and she's able, like, we can FaceTime and we don't have to pay for calls anymore, and I don't have to drive 7 hours to see her. I mean, the blessings that come from her being out far outweigh, anything else. But so to answer the question of like our relationship, it's been rocky for obvious reasons, but it's always stayed solid, because we've talked it through and we've processed it together, and um, you know, forgiving each other, and you know, it's been a lot, and that kind of took a lot, but you know, it I didn't want to lose that just because of what had happened. Um,
It's very
yeah.
interesting, right?
So
That like we can allow one poor choice in our life can change so much, right? But also one poor choice of someone that we care about in our life can definitely make or break how we decide to move forward with that relationship. And I think it's really beautiful that you were able to lean into that forgiveness of her and yourself. So
yeah, I didn't want to, because holding on to like that, um, I won't even call it hate, but like holding on to that feeling wouldn't do me any good, and it certainly wouldn't do her any good, because I'm all she has. I mean, really. Um, while she was away, I got rid of her house that all this happened in, which that was a big thing, because she had always thought when she got out she'd have that to go back to, and she didn't. So it was like there was a lot of other pieces at play. There's a lot of things that happened in between time that kind of had to be worked through and talked through. But like it was just you know, the way I see it, like I am built for what I've been dealt. Like I was built for this. I again, like I said at the beginning, I believe that, and there's one more part to this which I haven't gotten to about my son, but I'll get there in a second. But like I really think there is a reason that you don't get to choose the hand you're dealt, but you definitely can choose how you play the cards. And I think the way I've played them has brought me here, because any one of those things could have, I mean, really taken me down a dark path. And at each fork in the road, I chose what I think is the right way anyways. But yeah, I mean, if my story can be somebody else's survival guide, then that's, even just one person, hears it and was like, wow, if she made it through this and then this and then this, or I'm going through the same thing and she dealt with it like this, like that's great. Like that's kind of what I hope, to get out of this.
yeah.
Yeah. And
The
then,
the fact what you just said about the hand you're dealt, that's something I've been saying a lot to some of my teenage clients that are going through some stuff of like divorce or other things. And it's like, listen, I'm going to put it real. Like, you were dealt a shitty hand, right? But we can together figure out how you're going to play that. And then just because you might lose this round doesn't mean that you're going to lose the game, right? Like, and so we have to be able to learn from the round that we're currently playing and the cards that we threw to say, like, you know what? That wasn't right. That wasn't the path I wanted to take. I can take a detour, right? Like, I'm not going to play that card again. I'm going to
Yeah.
try this way, right? And so it's just really speaks to how we can look at that. Um, Leading into what you wanted to, and we can kind of go into this and then wrap it up to kind
Yeah.
of what the next segment is going to be when we meet again. But
Mhm.
um, all of this that you went through kind of led you to being your own rock, to being your own, you know, solid advocate, even though there were times you probably felt like you couldn't and you were shaking through it, to discovering not meeting your husband because you had known him for a really long time, but
Yes.
kind of in that coming together and deciding together, like, we want this. This is who we want to be together.
Mhm.
Flash forward to getting married and having a few beautiful baby boys, one of which has significant needs,
Mhm.
that all of this foundation has led you to say, don't mess with me. I've been through worse. I know how to advocate for my kid. And nobody knows how to advocate harder than me because of what I know and what I've been through. So it's your middle guy, right?
It is. Yep.
And yep. That middle child, I tell you,
I swear.
the thing. But why don't we kind of segue a little bit? I know
Mhm.
so much more in way of like getting together with your husband and the beautiful kind of stuff around that, which you could touch on if you want, but kind of how all of this has led you to what is going on with him and where your passion now is and helping others kind of navigate
Yeah.
who might be going through similar things.
Yes. So just
And
a
again,
real
thank
quick.
you for sharing all of that. It's
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
know it's hard to talk about. I know you've talked about it, but every time it's healing you, but it's opening that wound, even though it's like this, like kind of flushing the wound and healing it, it's like,
Yes.
but
Yeah, even because every time I talk about it, like, afterwards, I think back to who I was just talking to and, like, their reaction to it and talking about it again, and I think each time it gets easier, but it gets different because it's just another way of healing. It's a different, I might have added in a detail that I forgot or whatever it is. So, but it also reminds me of how strong I am and, like, going into this next thing that I'm about to talk about, it's really I built a hell of a backbone with each one of these things that I went through and standing up for myself and learning how to deal with really hard shit and um not backing down, not being afraid to put my foot down or to set a boundary and to hold the boundary. Um but yeah, so my husband and I, real quick, I've known him forever. He was actually one of my brother's really good friends, growing up, and life just brought us back together. We both happened to be at the same Bills game in 2014, and we saw it on each other's Instagram. Kind of were like, "Oh, hey, I was there. Oh, yeah," and then we hung out, and then I mean, now we're married and have 3 kids. So, um, again, there's much more to that than that little nutshell thing, but uh it's beautiful. He's my best friend, and I wouldn't wanna be on this ride with anybody else. He's just the most amazing human being. But speaking of our second son, Beckham, he the middle child, the wild child, he was he was 2 years old, in August, and he was gonna be turning 3, um and this was 2009 to geez, see time. He was diagnosed when he was 2 and he just turned 6. Um, and yeah, it was COVID because it was just crazy. It was absolutely crazy chaos. And we had just got back from vacation and we noticed he was losing weight, thinning out, but you don't think anything of it because kids, that's what happens. They run around, they're boys, they thin out and get taller. Um, but he had been wetting the bed a lot, which again, he was potty training. We were getting out of diapers, so that was nothing uncommon. Um, and it was a Friday morning, and he had been up all night the night before, just really struggling. He was wetting the bed and he just didn't feel good. He was really tired. And he woke up in the morning and he said, water, I want water. So I gave him a cup of water and he drank it in like seconds. And then he had another, he was like, I want more. So I give him another cup. And like within a span of 10 minutes, I swear he had 7 cups of water. And I'm like, you are really dehydrated. Like you must really not feel very good. And I was looking at him and I'm like, you just don't look right. Like he was really gray and he was just super tired. And I told my husband, I'm like, I think I'm going to take him to the doctor. Like something is wrong here. This is more than just him being dehydrated. So I took him into, his doctor, and they were asking me some weird questions like, did he drink bath water? Like, did he ever drink toilet water? And I'm like, you guys are crazy. Are you joking me? Like, just help my kid. And they were like, we're going to get a urine sample. I'm like, well, that's going to be tough. He's in diapers, but somehow I managed to get enough urine for a sample. And they took it and I didn't know what they were doing. So I'm just waiting in the room with this very limp child on my lap. And the doctor came in with just this look on his face. And he kind of dropped his head and he was like, we just tested his urine and he has ketones in his urine. And then at the time, I'm like, you're going to have to say more because I don't know what that means. And he's like, the only reason he would have ketones in his urine is because he has type 1 diabetes. And, you hear the word diabetes on commercials and whatever, but you don't really know anything about it until it hits you, like, kind of with everything else, I guess. But, so he's like, you're going to have to go get his blood work to see what his actual blood sugar is. And you're going to have to go to Strong and they're going to admit you for a couple days. You have to go through a whole course to learn all about it. So sure enough, we got his blood work done and we got up to Strong, and at the time his blood was 780 and normal blood sugar is supposed to be like between 80 and 100. So like 780 is, and then they kept mentioning something called diabetic ketoacidosis, which is just a very deadly thing that can happen when your sugar gets too high, because his body had stopped producing insulin. And I was learning all this and it was COVID. So only I could go back in the ER and masks and there was doctors in and out. And my husband was sitting in the parking garage for hours waiting till we got admitted so he could come up. But yeah, that was kind of the start of that, which has been I always say that that's actually, that is what drove me to therapy because that sent my anxiety and PTSD just to a place where I could not handle it anymore because it's my child now that's going through something and it's daily life and death. And it is
Parallels, right? So many parallels to what your mom went through in a different way. And so it
yeah,
just led you to this like aha moment of like, oh my God, I get it. I get it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Like I will do whatever it takes to keep this kid alive. Like, a different obviously circumstances, but definitely that same drive, that same instinct. I knew something was wrong with him, and I love my husband dearly, but he was like, he's just got a cold, he's fine. And I was like, no, I'm bringing him to the doctor, something is going on. And sure enough, it's this disease that there's no cure for. He has to take insulin all day every day. He has highs, he has lows. He's several times almost slipped into a coma. Just as we were logging on, I was saying I might have to jump off to take a call from his nurse because they're having their Christmas party today at school and sugar cookies, and that's a whole thing on its own. And the learning curve that's gone on here is crazy. And since him being diagnosed, I have been able to really help my friends and whoever, really. People who have seen me on Facebook, who don't maybe know me personally, but who have read through or keeping up with him and my post about him, because I post quite frequently about his highs or his lows or something that's happened. Um, uh, I've really helped a lot of my friends who have had questions and are like, they'll message me privately and be like, hey, my kid is drinking a lot. Like, what are other signs I have to look out for? And there's been a few instances where they've actually had me come over and use my son's kit to poke their kid's finger just to give them peace of mind that the sugar wasn't so high that they need to go to the hospital. So, um, and that's just the start. Like, I want to teach whoever I can about it. I plan to write more books about it, being the parent of a type 1 diabetic, because it is the hardest thing I've ever done. And that says a lot considering what I've just told all of you.
Yeah. When I think part of it, right, is that there's no normal. I never want to say like normal, right? But the societal normal of just being able to send your kid to school and go to work. And like, yes, if your kid's sick or has pink eye, we've had to reschedule this because he has
Yes.
pink eye, right? Like if you have pink eye or whatever, you got to run to pick him up because he's coughing and got a cold or he threw up, right? Like those are things that could happen. But and yes, in the back of our mind, like even now, I'm like, okay, what time is it? Oh, my kids are, getting out of school here shortly. I want to make sure they get home okay because they walk, all of those things, right? Goes through our parents' mind. But for you, it is like every second you could become so perseverative on it, right? You could have to like look at his levels every second. And it's like, well, that's not good for you. That's not good for him, but it's also scary not to. So it's like, there's nothing that you guys can do that's like really just, oh, let's just go do this. You have to be prepared. You probably have to have some extra stuff on you. You've got to have food. You
Always.
got to have, right? Like you have your emergency kit, you know?
Yeah.
So
At all times.
yeah,
We call it the 5-minute disease because it literally every 5 minutes, it's called his Dexcom, which is a device he wears on his body that tells us what his blood sugar is, and it updates every 5 minutes. So literally every 5 minutes, my phone is beeping because he'll be high, or it beeps really fast because he's dropping too low. Every single decision we make is really based around this. I mean, he can't, as a matter of fact, he takes the bus, which that's new this year. I brought him to school last year and picked him up because I wasn't ready for that. We're trying the bus this year, and it's been great because the driver is so good. He sits directly behind her. They'll like if she's got a question, they phone the school, and then the school phones me about like, okay, he says he doesn't feel good. Like, do I have to reroute and bring him right home? Like even the bus ride, like I have the follow app to see where he is at all times, so that if I have to drive to the bus to get him off, then I have to do that. I mean, he can't have sugar cookies at school without it being a whole thing. Every single lunch I make, I have to write how many carbs are in that lunch so that the nurse knows what to dose him at school. We can't go to the playground. We can't, and you have to have his PD for his insulin pump. We have to have extra insulin. We have to have low supplies because if he goes too low and he needs sugar, I mean, it's not, even if he wants to go play with his friends down the road, he has to take his phone with him, that because it has to stay within 20 feet of him at all times for me to have a number on him. So he can't even just go down the street to play with his friends. He can't go swimming for too long because it can't be submerged underwater for more than 15 minutes. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, this, like you said, we're going to have a whole separate thing on this, but there's so much to this that people just don't know. And I think it's so important because knowledge is power. And man, did I wish I knew some of this stuff ahead of time. Yeah. So I'm all about.
and I think, with being, not that I want to get all like on this end, but being more inclusive in it as a community to know that there are these things that happen, right? Not that we're going to not that we all have to be educated in everything, right? It's not realistic, but it's like you have a niche, your
Yeah.
niche is this, and like you are well educated personally. And what I see coming for you at some point, some level of professional, right? Where like you coach people through this, you coach parents, you help advocate, whatever this looks like in the future for you. But you have personal and professional experience on some level. And so being able to really help people navigate that, right? Like as a parent that doesn't have a child with that sort of need, um, to be able to teach my kids what that means and what that looks like, right? So that if a friend of theirs is not looking right, they can say,
Yes.
oh yeah, my friend has diabetes, he needs this, and right? Like not
It,
that they have to know everything, but to be able to just recognize, right? And we have lots of conversations at home, me and my kids, and now me being them being therapist kids, like it's a whole nother, they're like, stop therapizing me, mom. Like, but my poor kids, but it's like, I'm very much about like, hey, if this happens and your friend's going through this, like, and my one kiddo was sort of being bullied a little bit last year. And like, I mean, he definitely was, but we had the conversation of like, why do you think that kid's doing that? Like, people that are happy and not hurting and not in pain don't typically bully other people. Right. So let's talk about like, yes, we need to advocate for ourselves. Yes, I'm giving you full on permission to push back. And if you get in trouble, and the principal calls me, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I told him. Like,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get in
I
trouble,
got your back,
right?
baby.
Like, but also understanding that this kid, there's more to it. He's being mean to
Yep.
you for a reason. People don't be mean to people just for no reason, right?
Yep.
So, it's helping our kids. It starts with us, it starts with the home of helping our kids understand that there are people that are different in the world, and how can we support them? We don't have to do everything for them. In fact, we want your son to be able to grow up and know his own stuff and be able to be his own best advocate, just as you are now, right? But we also want to be, as a community, as supportive to people that we can, like, to
Yeah.
foster that independence. So
And it can
it-
happen to anybody at any time. Like there was nothing, there's no known cause for type 1 diabetes. It happened to my uncle at age of 40. It can happen at any time. It could literally happen to me or you at any point in time. There's nothing, it doesn't get caused by eating too much sugar. There's so many things out there. Like the education about it is so important. Kids at school are always like, what's that on your arm? Because he wears his pump and his Dexcom, and he's always like, I have diabetes. Like, and he loves to talk about it because we've told him like, definitely talk about it when you can and when you're comfortable. Like, you know, and teach kids about it, and that it's okay that you have that cookie, but you just need medicine to help you process that cookie, so that they understand it. But and then there's a whole nother part to it, which again we'll get into at a different point in time, but like how his siblings have dealt with it. His older brother Jackson has had his whole own thing with it. And even our own family, like our immediate family, who don't totally understand it. And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to it, but if there's anybody I can help or talk through or give them tips or what to look out for, or because it really can happen at any point in time. And just because your kid is extra thirsty, I'm not trying to scare people like, oh, if they're drinking 10 cups of water, they might really just be thirsty. So don't go like, why are you drinking so much? Because I'm like that with my poor Jackson, he's non-diabetic. But when he gets extra thirsty, my husband and I are looking at each other like, why is he drinking so much?
Yeah,
I have to kind of remind myself, like, it's okay, he's allowed to be thirsty, but
a little boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's important to know these things. Yeah, like the nurse just texted me saying his finger stick, he is 434, which is very high, um, which means he did have his sugar cookies.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's constant. I talk more with the school nurse than I swear I do with my husband, but yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think the beauty of this is, as we will wrap up here and kind of set the segue, that um we're going to go deeper into this part of your life, and knowing, educated, and just what it's done for you therapeutically, healing, and like what the wounds have brought up and how it's affected your family and how you can support people. So we're going to do a whole nother episode, which I'm super
can't
stoked
wait.
about, because I want to learn, but also I just want to be in your space a little bit more because I enjoy talking to you. But um I think, to kind of wrap this up though, really none of these things have defined you.
No.
None of the instances, even being the mom of a kiddo that has these medical needs, like, you haven't let any of this define you. You are still you, and you've kind of leaned on these. This is a piece of me. This is a part of me. This is a part of my story and who I am, but it's not all of me. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing that you have been able to find and continue your journey of healing, which I just can't wait to see what you do with all this, because you're a remarkable human being. And again, I don't know how you're standing, but like, it's amazing. So, to wrap up this session, if there was one thing from this part of your story that we've talked about today, like, that you want people to leave with, if there's one word or one phrase or one just kind of powerful thing that you want people to take away, what would it be?
just, I mean, it's so cliche. Like there's so many sayings out there that are like, you never know how strong you are until strong is all you have, or it's like it's totally possible to go through the worst thing ever. And that means something different for everybody. Like you can be at absolute rock bottom, and I promise, like, it might feel like it's forever and it's so dark and it's so hard and you kind of said it, like shaking through it. Like you might have to shake, your voice might shake, your body might shake, literally. It might be like the trauma you've gone through or that you're going through. Like there are ways to get out of it. There is healing. There's, um, kind of going back to that cards thing. Like you are going to get dealt shitty cards at some point, like whether you got a whole shitty hand all at once or that one hand just didn't work out. You don't have to lose the game. Like you just have to navigate and change the way you play the next hand. Like put on your poker face, or just there's a way um to win the game. And I think it's just important to, like, yeah, don't let those things define you. Don't you don't live in the past anymore. Like, you just, each day is a new day to be able to be like, okay, like, yeah, that was tough, but hey, I made it. I'm here today, so like let's just keep going. I mean, it's all so cliche, but it's so true. Like it's really, you read these motivational quotes and it's um, you know, the storm will pass, but it really will. Like I'm sitting here is so happy and content, and I can't wait to do great things with the knowledge that I have about and this goes further than diabetes. I mean, that's kind of my hold right now, and I plan to do a lot with it. But like even surviving domestic violence and abuse and a mother in prison and my brother overdosing. I mean, like there's just there's so much that can be done with those things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's one thing I do want to piggyback on that. It's funny because I just said this to somebody 2 days ago, but it got brought up a year ago for me that I heard this saying, and I think you'll love this if you don't know it already. But like, for you, the catalyst of you kind of being like, holy cow, I need therapy was this last event, right? Because it was like storm after storm after storm after storm. You're trying to outrun it. When you
Yep.
finally are like, I can't run away from these storms anymore. I need to be the storm. I need to sit. I need to let it pass. I need to let it move through me. And it's interesting because something came up on my, I don't know who it was that said it. I should go back and give credit where credit is due because I hate saying things and not giving credit. But um, it was when DeMar Hamlin, like from the Buffalo Bills,
Oh yeah.
he died and came
Yeah.
back to life when he had that cardiac arrest event. So this came out shortly after about like buffalo, a herd of buffalo. There's a whole thing where I guess, and I don't know if it's true, but I think it is. I've like researched it a little bit and I was like, oh, Google says it's real, right? But like cows apparently try to like outrun the storm. Like if there's a storm, they try to outrun it. They try to run
I
away,
believe that. That sounds right.
right? Okay. Buffalo, there's a storm coming, they sit. They don't try to run. And
Okay.
what's so wild is they sit and they wait for the storm to pass. They sit in the storm, they wait for it to pass, and then they get up and they go. And it's like,
Oh, I love that.
right when I heard it about the Buffalo, because there was like somebody speaking about the Buffalo Bills, and then I started seeing it all over because people were posting it. And I'm like, this is what they're going through. They're going through like, because they had a lot of issues that last season, right?
Yep.
And it was like, they just had to sit and let the storm pass. That you just sometimes have to sit in the shit and feel it. Right.
Yes.
You never allowed yourself to stop and sit and feel. You just were like, plow through, plow through, plow through. And there is a level of what you're saying of like, get up the next day and keep going. But keep going in the sense of keep moving through the storm, keep allowing the storm to pass through you. Don't try to resist it. Just sit in it and therapeutic.
Almost welcome it, like welcome it, and not even just sit through it, but at this point, it's like I welcome it because I know I can handle it, and I actually kind of enjoy it because I wanna be able to feel it and be able to process the things. I kind of have time now, haha, with 3 kids, but, time now and, like, therapy, helps with that because I finally am like, "Okay, it's my turn to feel it and let the rain and the thunder and all of that hit me," and then we can, like, really use it, and I can use the storm instead of just, like, watching for it. I can, use it to my advantage, and I really think I'm able to do that now.
Yeah, such a beautiful place to be when you trust in
Yes.
yourself enough to get through anything. It's wild,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I love that story. I love that example. It's just like, be a buffalo, right? Like, that's and it was
I
like,
am so using that. I'm gonna make
yeah,
that a sign in my house.
yeah,
I'm
it's
totally
awesome.
doing that.
And for people like, I'm a Bills supporter. I'm not, I'm those that know me, my OGs that are gonna listen, I'm a Packers fan, but I'm a Bills supporter. So it was
Same.
like such like,
Giants fan over here.
it was like just such a heartfelt thing and makes so much sense. And so there are days where it's just like, we gotta just be a buffalo. That's it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's so many people that can use that. I'm gonna actually use that with my son who sometimes has a hard time dealing with stuff and just be like, "Hey, let's sit with this for a little bit and let it we're gonna get through it and just feel it," and there we go. I love that.
Feel all the feelings. Well, my dear, this has been a pleasure. I know we probably talked for a lot longer than anybody anticipated, but I think all of this is so important. Your story is remarkable. Who you are as a human is amazing. I'm grateful that we've met. I'm grateful that I'm
So
the one.
grateful. Thank you again, Rich, out there.
Yeah, right. And like I'm grateful that I'm the one that gets to like support you through kind of this book launch that you're going to be doing and like just when that comes out to the world, I'd love to meet again and just support you in launching that. Like I think this is
Yeah.
just the
It's
beginning.
been great. It's been
So,
great.
well, y'all, we will get back together for more to come on the diabetic journey and like what you're doing with that and how you can support people and
Yeah.
might need some more advice and support. But thank you, my dear.
Yes, thank you. That was so much fun, and I can't wait to talk again.
All right. Well, I am going to click off, hang on the line. You and I'll chat for 2 seconds after this. But for
Okay.
the rest of you guys, we'll catch you next time. And thank you always for being here. So.
Yes, thanks, guys.